Chapter 181. Now that the situation had developed to this point, Xianxia was clear that unless he allowed them to search his body, they would definitely not believe his one-sided words. And to have them search his spatial belt was absolutely impossible. Not to mention the two Class 5 monster cores that were quietly lying there, just the Class 4 monster cores and a large pile of purple crystal coins in his spatial ring would cause many of them to have evil intentions. Right now, Xianxia already understood that there was no point in continuing to hide it. Although the other party had the advantage in numbers, he was not afraid. Xianxia swept his gaze around. His powerful divine sense allowed him to easily capture dozens of powerful auras in the surroundings. He then smiled indifferently and said, "Since everyone has already guessed it, then there is no need for me to hide it. That's right, the Class 5 monster cores are indeed on me, but there are only 2 of them. I wonder how you will distribute the 2 Class 5 monster cores with so many of you here." Xianxia's words immediately caused the hundreds of people present to hesitate. The value of a Class 5 monster core was definitely above the corpse of a Class 5 monster core. Regarding the Class 5 monster core, no one present was willing to give it up so easily. However, they also knew that there were only 2 Class 5 monster cores, and there were more than a dozen forces present. Every one of them was a big shot in their own right. Even if there was a difference in strength, it would not be too big. So to distribute the 2 Class 5 monster cores would be a difficult problem. For a moment, the atmosphere of the entire street became a little strange because of Xianxia's words. Many people's eyes flashed with a trace of sternness, and when they looked at those who had conflicts with them, their eyes were filled with killing intent. However, this atmosphere did not last for long before it was broken by an old voice. "Mr. Wu Yun, as for how to distribute the monster cores, we will naturally discuss this matter after this matter is over. You don't have to worry about it. Now, you should take out the Class 5 monster cores." Xianxia looked towards the source of the voice and saw that the speaker was an old man in a white robe. The old man was relatively short and could only reach Xianxia's chest at most. His face was very old and was covered with wrinkles. However, his eyes were bright and full of spirit. Although the old man's tone was flat, the meaning behind his words made Xianxia very unhappy. Xianxia sneered and met the old man's flat gaze. He said, "Sir, I'm sorry. I want to keep these 2 Class 5 monster cores for myself. I'm not selling them." Xianxia emphasized the last 2 words. His tone was resolute and decisive, leaving no room for negotiation. When Xianxia said the words, "not selling," everyone's expression changed slightly. Their gazes towards Xianxia became cold and gloomy. Among them, there were many people who did not bother to conceal their killing intent. If not for the fact that there were over a dozen forces eyeing the Class 5 monster cores at the same time, causing the situation to become complicated, these people would not be so polite to Xianxia. They would have already snatched them. Spending money to buy Class 5 monster cores was not their intention at all. "Mr. Wu Yun, if you keep the 2 Class 5 monster cores, it will only bring you trouble. If you don't handle it well, you might even get yourself killed. You have to choose carefully." The one who spoke was a young man who looked to be in his 30s. He was dressed in a green robe embroidered with golden threads. He was from the Muda family. "That's right, Mr. Wu Yun. It's not appropriate for you to keep the Class 5 monster cores. You should sell them to us," the people from the Jia Luo family said. After that, the other forces also began to ask Xianxia to sell the monster cores to them. However, no one gave a specific price. Xianxia knew how precious the 2 Class 5 monster cores were. Moreover, he had over 100,000 purple crystal coins in his spatial belt. He did not lack money at all. Therefore, he would not sell them. Xianxia cupped his hands apologetically and said, "Everyone, I'm sorry. I'm not selling the Class 5 monster cores. I still have important matters to attend to, so I won't accompany you." After saying that, Xianxia directly walked forward. He seemed to be casually walking, but he was already on guard. He was prepared to take action at any time. You refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit." Xianxia's actions angered quite a few people. Immediately, several Saint Masters rushed towards Xianxia under the signal of their leader. They tried to capture Xianxia. The actions of these people seemed to have ignited a fuse. When they moved, the other forces also rushed out. A portion of these people rushed towards Jianchen, while the other portion went to stop the others who wanted to capture Jianchen. At this time, the leaders of the various forces were very clear that if they wanted to obtain the Class 5 monster cores, the most direct method was to capture Jianchen. With regards to Jianchen's strength, these great Saint Masters had already seen it clearly. He was only a high-level Saint Master. In these forces, he could only be considered a decent fighter. Therefore, they did not put him in their eyes. Seeing the people rushing towards him, Jianchen's face revealed a cold smile. His eyes flashed with killing intent. Although the forces behind these people were not to be trifled with, if he did not retaliate after being bullied, then he would not be Jianchen. Moreover, Jianchen was not someone who was afraid of trouble. The silver-white light wind sword appeared in Jianchen's right hand. With a flash of silver light, the light wind sword pierced towards the first group of people. Jianchen's sword was incomparably fast. The few Saint Masters did not expect Jianchen's sword to be so fast. It was so fast that they could not even see it clearly. In the end, before they could even react, the light wind sword had already pierced through their throats. Unexpectedly, not a single one of them was able to dodge. After reaching the high level of Saint Master, Jianchen's physique and battle prowess had increased by leaps and bounds. Unless it was someone with wind-attributed Saint Force, very few Saint Masters would be able to dodge his swift sword. In the blink of an eye, several Saint Masters had died under Jianchen's sword. Jianchen's sudden display of strength caused the people who wanted to capture Jianchen to turn pale with fright. They immediately became vigilant and took out their saint weapons. Even so, they did not slow down in the slightest. Chapter 182. Following the flash of the silver sword, 3 of the people who were charging towards Jianchen had their throats slit by the light wind sword. At this moment, the other people who were close to Jianchen all swung their saint weapons at Jianchen, bringing along powerful saint force with them as they slashed at him. Jianchen didn't even bother to look at the saint weapons coming at him from behind. It was as if he had a pair of eyes on the back of his head. He just tilted his body slightly and dodged the attacks of the saint weapons. Ding! Not only did the saint weapons not hit Jianchen, but because they were all aiming at the same target, the saint weapons actually collided with each other in midair. Following the sound of metal clashing, the saint weapons collided with each other, creating a visible shockwave that spread out in all directions. Jianchen's eyes flashed with a cold light. Taking advantage of the moment when the saint weapons collided, the light wind sword in his hand once again formed a blurry sword shadow that enveloped the people around him. The sharp sword tip was like the scythe of the Grim Reaper, lightly cutting across the throats of the saint weapons, leaving behind a faint trace of blood as it mercilessly reaped their lives. In less than a breath's time, 10 Saint Masters had already died under Jianchen's sword. Jianchen's eyes flashed with a dense killing intent as the light wind sword's blurry sword light became even denser. Just as Jianchen was about to continue killing the remaining people, a loud shout suddenly rang out. "Stop!" Hearing this shout, the people who were still charging towards Jianchen immediately stopped. At this time, the people who had their throats slit by Jianchen all fell to the ground at the same time. What a fast sword! This sword is so F***ing fast. In the crowd, many people with extraordinary eyesight let out cries of surprise. Among them, there were quite a few Saint Masters who could clearly see Jianchen's sword. However, without exception, all of them were shocked by the lightning-fast speed of the sword. This was because they all knew that even if they were facing such a fast sword, they would still have to be careful. Otherwise, if they weren't careful, they would lose their lives. At this moment, the Saint Masters who originally looked down on Jianchen completely changed their gazes towards Jianchen. It was the kind of gaze one would only have when facing an opponent of the same level. When they saw those people fall to the ground in the blink of an eye, the expressions of the remaining people who only had sacred expert strength all changed greatly one after another. Their expressions all became a bit grave. In that instant just now, they could only catch a few streaks of silver-white light flashing past. They didn't see how those people were killed at all. Jianchen stood in the middle of the corpses with his sword in his right hand. His blood-stained sword was pointed towards the ground as he calmly looked around and said, "If you want to steal something from my hands, it won't be an easy task. At the very least, I will make you pay an extremely heavy price." Jianshan's words made the group of people look at each other. A person who only had the strength of a high-level Saint Master not only didn't panic in the slightest when facing hundreds of people, but instead spoke such arrogant words. Especially when there were quite a few Saint Masters among these hundreds of people. If these words were to be said, perhaps no one would believe it. Although Jianshan's words sounded a bit arrogant, surprisingly, no one dared to say anything. Even those who had the strength of a Saint Master were no exception. Every single one of them remained silent, because the corpses of the Saint Masters on the ground were very good proof. Clap, clap, clap. An old man standing on the roof clapped his hands and said with a smile on his face, "Mr. Wu Yun truly has great skills. You actually made all of us misjudge you. Admirable, admirable." Jianshan smiled indifferently and didn't reply to the old man's words. He said, "Everyone, do you still want to steal the thing in my hands?" As soon as Jianshan's voice fell, a middle-aged man said with a gloomy face, "Don't think that you can look down on the world just because you have some strength. Wu Yun, you actually dared to kill my Yulan family's people. Today, if you don't give my Yulan family an explanation, don't even think about leaving this place." "Mr. Wu Yun, our Muda family also had a few people who died in your hands. They were all outstanding talents in our family and were highly valued by the patriarch. If you don't give us an explanation for this matter, then it will be very difficult for us. Our patriarch's anger isn't that easy to deal with." An old man from the Muda family said with a sinister smile on his face. Hearing the words of these two parties, the rest of the powers looked optimistic and no one retreated. Although Jianshan's strength had shocked all of them, it wasn't enough to make them think of retreating. After all, a fifth-order monster core was too tempting. The only problem now was that there were too many powers present. 2 fifth-order monster cores were simply too difficult to distribute. As for Jianshan, although his strength had gained everyone's attention, it wasn't enough to make them feel apprehensive. Jianshan's gaze gradually became sharp. He already understood that today's battle was unavoidable. Coldly laughing, he said, "Since that's the case, then I'll give you an explanation right now." As soon as his voice fell, the light wind sword in Jianshan's hand suddenly exploded with a silver light. The intense and sharp sword chi spread through the air, causing the people who were 10 meters away to feel a faint pain on their skin. It was as if there were thousands of swords pressing against their bodies. The tip of Jianshan's foot lightly tapped the ground, and his body floated forward like a ghost. It was as if the short distance of a dozen meters didn't exist in front of him. In an instant, he had crossed the distance and appeared in front of the Yulan family members. Under the control of his arm, the light wind sword transformed into a sky full of sword shadows that enveloped the Yulan family members. Towards the Yulan family, Jianshan had long since disliked them. Therefore, he was the first to make an example of them. "Everyone, be careful." The leader of the Yulan family shouted, and a huge sword appeared in his hand. Ignoring the sword shadows that filled the sky, he brandished his huge sword and slashed in a certain direction. Ding! With a crisp sound of collision, the large sword and a slender long sword that was only 2 fingers wide collided with each other. A powerful ripple of energy spread out from the point of contact, forming a visible ripple of energy that rapidly spread out in all directions. In the end, the ripple of energy slammed into the buildings on both sides of the street. Suddenly, the hard walls made of stone were shaken violently by this energy ripple, and traces of dust splashed out from them. Just as the 2 saint weapons clashed, Jianshan immediately put away his light wind sword. Using the tip of his foot, he quickly twisted his body and turned into a ghost. Going around the saint weapon wielding the great sword at an extremely fast speed, he shot behind the saint weapon wielding the great sword. At this moment, the Yulan family's members were all on guard. Seeing Jianshan rushing towards them, the faces of the people standing at the front became serious. However, their movements were not slow either. Powerful saint force covered their weapons as they swung them towards Jianshan. Chapter 183. With the light wind sword's extremely fast movement speed, Jianxin's silvery sword had already turned into a thin ray of light. Even a great Saint Master would have to be careful when dealing with it. To a Saint Master, this kind of speed was definitely fatal. The light wind sword swept through the throats of several Saint Masters from the Yulan family without the slightest bit of resistance. In an instant, it cut through their main arteries. Meanwhile, those sacred experts could only see a streak of silver-white radiance flash past extremely quickly. Quite a few of them didn't even have time to react before they felt a wave of slight pain from their throats. Then, a wave of powerful suffocation spread, and soon after, they fell to the ground. Jianxin continuously shuttled through the Yulan family's group. As the silvery white light wind sword continuously turned into blurry sword images, people from the Yulan family could be seen clutching their throats in pain as they fell to the ground. Wherever Jianxin passed by, people would fall one after another. Among these Saint Masters, there were very few who could dodge Jianxin's swift sword. In less than 2 breaths of time, close to 20 people from the Yulan family had their throats slit with a single slash. Because of the speed and precision of his sword, Jianxin was able to kill people at an extremely fast speed. For those who were at most on the same level as him, he was able to kill them in one strike. During this short period of time, the great Saint Masters from the Yulan family had finally returned. However, when they saw that nearly 20 of their family members had died in less than 2 breaths of time, their eyes immediately became bloodshot. These Saint Masters were the core strength of their family. Moreover, they had only brought 50 people with them this time. To them, half of them had died in less than 2 breaths of time. To them, this was definitely a cruel matter that they could not accept. "You're courting death. Wu Yun, don't even think of leaving today." An old man and a middle-aged man roared as they leapt off the roof and charged at Jianxin. The saint weapons in their hands emitted surging pulses of energy as they cut through the air with an ear-piercing sound, swinging towards Jianxin at an extremely fast speed. On the ground, the middle-aged man who had clashed with Jianxin before roared out furiously as well. He wielded his sword with both hands as he charged at Jianxin. 3 great Saint Masters. Feeling the powerful auras of the 3 Saint Masters and the powerful Saint Force fluctuations from their Saint weapons, Jianxin revealed a cold smile. If Jianxin was still a Saint Master, 3 great Saint Masters would already be able to give him a lot of pressure. Unfortunately, Jianxin's strength had already reached the Saint Master level and was only an arm's length away from becoming a Saint Master. Compared to a Saint Master level Saint Master, his strength was several levels. Saint Masters were stronger than Saint Masters. Even Saint Masters. The light wind sword turned into a blur as it rapidly pierced out. The high-speed vibrations produced by the sword created a melodious sword cry. In just a short moment, Jianxin had already pierced out more than 10 times, colliding with the incoming saint weapons. The sounds of metal clashing against metal had already become one as each of the 3 saint weapons were pierced by the light wind sword multiple times in the blink of an eye. After 10 or so strikes, the 3 saint weapons were stopped in their tracks. Their seemingly powerful attacks were easily neutralized by Jianxin's 10 or so strikes. However, the saint weapons owners were not discouraged. The saint chi that was emitted from their saint weapons increased by a bit as they once again slashed towards Jianxin. Even though Jianxin was only a high-level Saint Master, facing the attacks of 3 great Saint Masters, he was not afraid at all. Instead, his aura soared to the heavens as the light wind sword in his hand once again became a blur as it pierced out like lightning towards the 3 saint weapons. Although Jianxin could also dodge the attacks, Jianxin wanted to use these 3 great Saint Masters to test his own strength. After all, this was the first time he had fought against a great Saint Master since he had become a high-level Saint Master. He wanted to use these people to test his limits. The 2 light wind sword and the 3 saint weapons that were completely disproportionate in size continued to fiercely clash against each other. As the weapons collided, the energy ripples that were created continued to spread out in all directions. Under the continuous impact of the energy ripples, the buildings on both sides of the street began to crack like a spider web. Moreover, the cracks quickly spread out into the distance. These buildings and shops had already been emptied out long before the battle began, so there was no need to worry about innocent people getting hurt. As for the hundreds of people who were still crowded at both ends of the street, all of them retreated a certain distance, leaving enough space for the few of them to fight. Seeing how Xianxia, who was clearly only a high-level Saint Master, was actually able to fight evenly against 3 great Saint Masters who were much stronger than him by himself, the shock in the eyes of the other great Saint Masters watching from the side became heavier and heavier. Practically all of their faces were filled with disbelief. This Wu Yun really isn't simple. Although he only has the strength of a high-level Saint Master, the battle strength he can display is actually this strong. Not only is the speed of his sword incomparably fast, but it is also extremely accurate. In the time it takes for others to strike once, his sword would have already struck twice or thrice. Moreover, his movements are as smooth as flowing water, without the slightest hesitation. His sword moves are practically flawless, making it impossible for others to find any openings. Sigh, just this battle experience alone is already much better than ours. An old man standing on the roof sighed. It seems like this Wu Yun has experienced many more life and death battles than we have. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to have such ingenious battle experience. You have to know that this kind of battle experience isn't something that can be taught. Only those who have truly walked on the edge of life and death will gradually understand it. The Vice Pavilion Master of the Flowing Cloud Sword Pavilion also had a serious expression as he spoke in a deep voice. The most important thing is that the speed at which he strikes is just too fast. Is this a special battle skill? The eyes of many people present lit up when they heard the word battle skill. Not only were battle skills extremely precious on the Tianyuan continent, they were also extremely rare. Even many of the organizations present did not have a single low-level battle skill. Even if they did, only the core members of the clan or the leaders of the clan would have the ability to learn it. To them, the word battle skill was definitely more enticing than Class 5 monster cores. The sword technique Wu Yun displayed is definitely an extremely profound battle skill. Otherwise, with his strength that is definitely no more than high-level sacred expert level, how could he display such speed? Almost at the same time, everyone present agreed with this theory. This was because they really could not find a better and more suitable explanation for what was happening before them apart from battle achievements. Chapter 184. At this moment, many of the great Saint Masters who were watching from the side felt their blood begin to boil. Because of the enticement of a battle skill, many of them couldn't help but want to rush over and snatch the item from Xianxia's hands. Although many of them had such thoughts, none of them made a move. None of them were fools. Seeing that Xianxia was able to fight evenly with the 3 great Saint Masters, they all knew that Xianxia's strength wasn't as simple as it appeared on the surface. Right now, almost everyone was holding on to the idea of letting the great Saint Masters from the Yulan family exhaust Xianxia's Saint Force. This was because Saint Force was the source of a martial artist's energy. Once too much Saint Force was used up, it would directly affect one's battle prowess. At that time, if they wanted to snatch the item from Xianxia's hands, it would be much easier. Xianxia and the 3 great Saint Masters fought for the time it takes to brew a cup of tea. During this time, Xianxia was completely fighting the 3 great Saint Masters head-on. Unless he had no other choice, he didn't even try to dodge their attacks. As for the 3 great Saint Masters from the Yulan family who were fighting with Xianxia, they became more and more shocked. Their hearts were already filled with shock and disbelief. They had never seen or heard of a high-level Saint Master being able to fight with 3 great Saint Masters for so long without even batting an eyelid. Most importantly, this high-level Saint Master was actually fighting with the 3 great Saint Masters head-on. After fighting with the 3 great Saint Masters for the time it takes to brew a cup of tea, Xianxia had a better understanding of his own strength. Not wanting to continue fighting with the 3 great Saint Masters, he shifted his body slightly to the side, dodging the incoming Saint weapons. His feet lightly tapped on the ground, and his body shot forward in a short instant. Following which, the light wind sword transformed into a silver-white light, as if it had broken through the limits of space, piercing towards one of the great Saint Masters with an inconceivable speed. The speed of this sword was so fast that the three great Saint Masters' faces suddenly changed. After fighting with the three great Saint Masters for so long, this sword was the fastest that Jianshan had ever used. In a short moment, the sharp tip of the light wind sword was already close to the throat of the great Saint Master. The expression of the great Saint Master who was being attacked by the light wind sword greatly changed. At such a close distance, the chances of him being able to dodge this sword was very low. In this moment of life and death, the great Saint Master didn't panic. With a shout, a large amount of Saint Qi burst out from his body, wrapping around his entire body. The Saint Qi then formed a ripple of energy that quickly spread out in an attempt to block the light wind sword. As long as he could by even a small amount of time, he would have a chance to dodge this sword that seemed to represent his death. At the same time, the great Saint Master's upper body twisted to the side as fast as he could. A great Saint Master's full strength was not to be underestimated. When the ripple of energy came into contact with the light wind sword, the light wind sword's sharp tip easily broke through and continued to stab towards the great Saint Master's throat. However, because of the ripple of energy, the light wind sword's speed was slightly slower than before. In the end, the light wind sword brushed past the great Saint Master's throat. Even so, the sharp sword Qi that was contained within the great Saint Master's sword had left a faint trace of blood on the great Saint Master's neck. Elder Ling quickly dodged. At this time, the voices of the two great Saint Masters came from the side. Both of them angrily roared as they brandished their saint weapons and attacked Jianshan with all their might. They wanted to buy time for the great Saint Master who had just dodged Jianshan's sword to recover. Jianshan coldly snorted. After verifying his strength, he didn't have the energy to continue playing around with these people. Since he had decided to end this battle quickly, he would use all of his strength. With a slight twist of his body, Jianshan dodged the two saint weapons by a hair's breadth. Then he once again stabbed out with the light wind sword. This time, the speed of the sword was not inferior to the speed of the previous one. After the great Saint Master had dodged Jianshan's sword, he didn't even have the time to stabilize himself before the light wind sword stabbed towards him like a viper. Pooh! With a flash of silver light, the sharp tip of the light wind sword easily pierced through the great Saint Master's throat. The tip of the light wind sword was stained with blood as it pierced through the back of the great Saint Master's neck. Dark red blood dripped down from the light wind sword's body to the ground. The second sword pierced through the old man's throat before he could even react. The two swords were too fast, and the pause in between was very short. It was so short that after the old man dodged the first sword, he did not have time to stabilize his body before the second sword arrived at him at lightning speed. Elder Ling Budong. Seeing the great Saint Master who had his throat pierced, the other two great Saint Masters of the great Saint Master clan cried out in alarm. Their eyes were filled with disbelief. None of them would have thought that Jianshan, who was only a high-level Saint Master, would not only be able to easily deal with three great Saint Masters, but also kill one of them. Wu Yun, I will kill you. Wu Yun, don't even think about leaving this place today. The two great Saint Masters glared at Jianshan with eyes filled with hatred and anger. Their eyes were so red that it seemed as if they wanted to cut Jianshan into 1,000 pieces. Immediately after, they brandished the saint weapons in their hands and rushed towards Jianshan. The surrounding people who were watching the show also had expressions of shock and disbelief. Jianshan, who was only a high-level Saint Master, was able to fight against three great Saint Masters and not be at a disadvantage. This was already enough to make them feel shocked, but now he had even killed a great Saint Master. If this scene did not happen in front of their eyes, even if they were beaten, they would not believe it. Even so, they felt as if they had entered into a dream. It was so unreal. Battle skill. This is the effect of a battle skill. This battle skill can actually allow a high-level Saint Master to kill a great Saint Master. This is definitely a powerful battle skill. No matter what price I have to pay, I have to get my hands on this combat skill. Within the crowd, a low voice once again sounded out. At this moment, everyone attributed Jianshan's killing of a great Saint Master to the battle skill. Immediately after, many people's eyes were filled with unconcealable excitement. Some of them even began to tremble slightly, as if this battle skill was their own. In their minds, they were all imagining how strong they would be if they could learn this battle skill. Following the sound of the sword whistling through the air, the light wind sword had already filled the sky with sword shadows, enveloping the remaining 2 great saint masters of the Yulan family. Ding 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 ding. A series of dense sounds of weapons colliding rang out as the light wind sword and the 2 saint weapons clashed at an extremely fast speed. However, Xianxian's sword was now much faster than before, and every strike was filled with killing intent. Therefore, after blocking 5 or 6 strikes each, the 2 great saint masters were forced into a panic. Chapter 185. Xianxian's sword became faster and faster, and the 2 great saint masters of the Yulan clan immediately felt the pressure increase. They had never thought that they, 2 great saint masters, would be forced into such a miserable state by someone who was only a high-level saint master. So, the silver light from the light wind sword brushed past one of the large swords and pierced through the throat of one of the middle-aged men in front of him, leaving a gaping hole in his throat. In just a few breaths of time, another great saint master died under Xianxian's sword. The last remaining old man turned pale with fright. The 2 of them were only barely able to fight evenly against Xianxian when they joined forces, and they were already at a disadvantage. Now that one of their companions had died, and with the strength that Xianxian had displayed, the old man was definitely not a match for Xianxian. If he really fought against Xianxian alone, he would probably die even faster. Thinking up to here, the old man from the Yulan family suddenly became incomparably ugly. However, he wasn't stupid and didn't give Xianxian any time to attack him. He immediately shouted, "Everyone, not only does Wu Yun have a rank 5 monster core, he also has at least 1 high-level battle skill. With just any one of us, we won't be able to kill him. Instead, we'll be killed instead. If we want to obtain the battle skill and the rank 5 monster core, we'd better join forces and capture him together." Although the old man from the Yulan family was trying to save himself, his words weren't without reason. After all, Xianxian had fought against 3 great saint masters alone and killed 2 of them in a short period of time. This scene was witnessed by everyone present. "Go, let's attack together. We must obtain the battle skill. Wu Yun's battle strength is too strong. 2 or 3 great saint masters won't have much of a chance of winning against him. While we have the advantage in numbers, we should kill Wu Yun first. Wu Yun is more of a threat to us than any of the large families." The words of the old man from the Yulan family quickly gained the approval of everyone present. Soon after, 7 or 8 great saint masters took out their saint weapons and charged towards Xianxian. Xianxian's face slightly changed. Although facing 3 great saint masters wasn't too difficult for him, there were more than 10 powers present. If they all joined forces to attack him, then he wouldn't be able to stop them. Right now, the situation didn't give Xianxian too much time to think. At this time, the 7 or 8 great saint masters had already closed in on Xianxian's body. With loud shouts, their saint weapons filled with powerful saint chi chopped towards Xianxian. Although these people hadn't worked together for many years, they still had a certain amount of battle experience. The direction in which the saint weapons were chopping towards Xianxian had sealed off all of the space in which he could dodge. Xianxian's face became serious. Facing 8 great saint masters at the same time, he felt an enormous pressure. With a wave of his right hand, the light wind sword's shadow filled the surrounding space. Ding, 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 ding. Following the sounds of weapons colliding, the light wind sword had clashed with the saint weapons more than 10 times in a short period of time. As for the saint weapons that were about to attack, they were all blocked by the light wind sword, causing their attacks to deviate. Xianxian's body slightly swayed, and in an instant he appeared in front of one of the great saint masters. His light wind sword was like lightning as it pierced towards the throat of one of the great saint masters. The middle-aged man had just struck out with his sword and had yet to retrieve his saint weapon. Coupled with the fact that the old energy in his body had just been depleted and the new energy was being replenished, the middle-aged man simply had no time to dodge this lightning-fast attack. Poof! The light wind sword directly pierced through the great saint master's throat. Feeling the intense pain in his throat and the feeling of being unable to breathe, the great Saint Master's heart was filled with disbelief. Waves of dizziness began to spread throughout his entire head. Am I dead? Am I dead? Is my life really going to end like this? I actually died at the hands of a Saint Master. In the final moments of his life, the great Saint Master still couldn't believe that a Saint Master like him would actually be killed by a Saint Master. As the light wind sword was pulled out of the great Saint Master's throat, the great Saint Master's body finally fell to the ground. Even as his life was about to end, his eyes were still wide open. Luda, a skinny man wearing a green robe who was standing on top of the roof, saw the great Saint Master lying on the ground. His face immediately changed, and with a cry of alarm, he jumped down from the roof and arrived in front of the great Saint Master in the blink of an eye. Luda, the green-robed man squatted down beside the great Saint Master, his voice filled with anxiety. However, the great Saint Master was already dead. No matter how he called out, there was no response. Not far away, there were 2 middle-aged men and 6 black-robed old men standing on top of a building, watching the battle from afar. Mayor, don't tell me that we don't have to go and stop them? After all, this Phoenix City is our territory. One of the old men indifferently said. Hearing this, a middle-aged man wearing a white robe lightly shook his head. His face was filled with helplessness as he said, "It won't be easy to stop them. Although this is Phoenix City, which is my territory, the people gathered here are not only the top powers of the surrounding cities, but also the 3 great clans of Phoenix City. If we act rashly, I'm afraid that we will offend quite a few people. However, this person called Wu Yun is quite strong. With the strength of a high-level Saint Master, he was actually able to kill a great Saint Master. In the Tianyuan continent, this is quite rare." The middle-aged man standing beside the mayor's side. The mayor slightly nodded and said, "Correct. I don't know where this Wu Yun came from, but his strength is actually so great. Especially his sword, it's so fast that even great Saint Masters have to be careful. However, there are several dozen great Saint Masters and several hundred Saint Masters there. Although Wu Yun's battle strength is not weak, I'm afraid that it will be very difficult for him to escape today. If he also has the strength of a great Saint Master, he should be able to escape from the encirclement of so many people." The one who spoke was an old man with a gloomy voice. Not far away, 2 people dressed in gray robes were standing straight on a roof as they stared at the battle in the distance. One of them was a middle-aged man, while the other was an old man. The old man was the one who had spent 100,000 purple crystal coins to purchase the corpse of the Class 5 magical beast, the Quick Cloud Beast. "Young Master, do you think we should go and help him? After all, the magical beast was provided by him. Speaking of which, it can be said that he has helped us," the gray-robed old man softly said as he stared at the battle in the distance. The middle-aged man beside him shook his head and said, "I don't think there's a need. This Wu Yun is not simple. He's so young, yet he already possesses the strength of a high-level Saint Master. His battle strength is so great that even regular great Saint Masters are not his opponent. This kind of potential is rare even in the entire Tianyuan continent. Moreover, his movement technique is not bad. If he wants to escape, there's still a chance for him to succeed. Moreover, this can be considered a test for him. After all, if he only cultivates quickly, his final accomplishments won't be too great. Only those who have gone through trials of blood and fire, those who have walked on the edge of life and death countless times, can be called geniuses. Otherwise, it would only be a disgrace to the word geniuses." The old man nodded in agreement and said, "Young Master's sunlight is vicious. This old man cannot compare to you." The middle-aged man smiled and said with a gentle voice, "Old Yun, let's go. Since we've already found the corpse of the magical beast, our mission can be considered complete. It's time for us to return." With that, the 2 of them leaped off the roof and disappeared with a few flashes. On the other side, Xianxia had already begun fighting with several great Saint Masters again. Facing the encirclement of 7 or 8 great Saint Masters at the same time, Xianxia was no longer able to fight as easily as he did against 3 great Saint Masters. After holding on for a while, a few more wounds appeared on his body. A few of the great Saint Masters had faint streaks of blood on their throats. If it were not for the fact that they had dodged in time at the most crucial moment and that someone had saved them, they probably would have become lifeless corpses long ago. The light in Jianxin's eyes flickered as he quickly glanced around. He knew that the sword technique he had used had been treated as a high-level battle skill. With how precious battle skills were on the Tianyuan continent, they definitely would not let him go so easily. Although he had killed several great Saint Masters, there were still over a dozen powerful organizations present. There were even several dozen great Saint Masters among them. If they worked together, it would be impossible for him to deal with them with his current strength. Chapter 186. He's trying to escape. Chase him, don't let him escape. The battle technique is on him, we can't let him escape. Quickly chase him. As soon as Jianxin started to run, the surrounding people began to shout. A high-level battle technique was something that even Earth Saint Masters would drool over. Many Earth Saint Masters had yet to learn a battle technique, let alone a group of great Saint Masters. Where do you think you're going? Hand over the battle technique and we'll spare your life. Following the fiery shouts, the great Saint Masters on the roof and the ground all began to attack Jianxin. If Jianxin had continued to fight, perhaps he wouldn't have attracted the attention of so many people. But now that he was running away, no one would allow him to do so. In total, there were at least 30 Saint Masters attacking Jianxin. The Saint force contained within the Saint weapons filled the small space, making it seem extremely terrifying. Above Jianxin's head, a huge axe, 2 huge swords, a machete, and a scimitar slashed down with a crushing force. Now that Jianxin was in the air, he had no way of changing his direction. Helpless, the light wind sword in his hand turned into a blur as it pierced out like lightning, creating a dense net of swords in front of him. Ding 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 ding. Following the sounds of weapons colliding, Jianxin's light wind sword clashed with the Saint weapons above his head. Although he managed to block the attacks, the Saint weapons were still powerful enough to force Jianxin's body back down to the ground. As soon as his feet touched the ground, Jianxin didn't hesitate and used all of his strength to push off the ground. Like a cannonball, he quickly shot forward. In front of Jianxin, 2 Saint Masters wielding Saint weapons walked out from the crowd. Seeing Jianxin rushing towards them, a sharp light flashed in their eyes. Following that, a powerful Saint force surged out from their Saint weapons and slashed towards Jianxin. The temptation of a battle technique was just too great, and Jianxin's strength had exceeded everyone's expectations. 1 or 2 Saint Masters wouldn't even be able to protect themselves against Jianxin. Thus, at this moment, the leaders of the various powers seemed to have a tacit understanding. Although they didn't communicate with each other, they all worked together to deal with Jianxin. Jianxin charged forward at an extremely fast speed. Just as the 2 Saint weapons were about to land on him, he changed his footsteps. His body moved at high speed, and in an unbelievable instant he moved 2 feet to the side, just dodging the attacks of the 2 Saint weapons. Ing! The light wind sword quickly pierced through the air, creating a sound similar to that of a sword breaking through the air. Then, as if it was carrying a thunderous force, it broke through all obstructions and pierced through the throat of one of the Saint Masters. Pooh! Jianxin's eyes flashed with a cold, killing intent. His eyes were filled with killing intent, as if they could annihilate his opponent's soul. Some of the weaker ones didn't even dare to look him in the eye. Just as the light wind sword pierced through the Saint Master's throat, Jianxin immediately pulled it out and stabbed it towards another Saint Master. Seeing that his comrade had been killed by a single photo, the remaining Saint Master couldn't help but turn pale with fright. Although he knew that Jianxin was strong, he didn't think that he would be strong to this extent. With just a single photo, he was able to kill a Saint Master. Seeing that the silver-white sword in Jianxin's hand that seemed to represent the Grim Reaper's scythe was already stabbing towards him, the great Saint Master's face suddenly changed. He used all of his strength to pull back his weapon and immediately used it to block his throat. Ding! Even though this Saint Master had managed to block the fatal blow, the power of the light wind sword still caused him to uncontrollably take 2 steps back. However, before he could even stabilize himself, the sharp sound of the air being pierced rang out again. All he could see was a silver ray of light piercing through his throat. When the light dissipated, it was discovered that it was actually a long, thin sword. The body of the sword was already stained with blood. The Saint Master who had his throat pierced by the light-wind sword widened his eyes. In the last moment of his life, there was only one thought in his mind: what a fast sword! At this time, the remaining 30 or so Saint Masters also rushed towards Xianxia from all directions. They quickly closed in on Xianxia, and a few of them who were already close to Xianxia had their saint weapons chopped towards Xianxia. Xianxia quickly scanned his surroundings and quickly blocked a few of the saint weapons that he couldn't dodge. Then, with a flash of his body, he charged into the group of Saint Masters. Right now, if he wanted to break out of the encirclement of 30 or so Saint Masters, he could only break out from the ground. This was because on the ground, there were hundreds of people covering him. If he was to blend into the crowd, it would be much harder for the Saint Masters to block him. If he were to escape through the air, he would most likely be surrounded by dozens of Saint Masters. With a flash, Xianxia charged into the group of Saint Masters. His light wind sword turned into a streak of white light that danced in all directions, continuously slicing through the throats of his enemies. Against these Saint Masters, Xianxia was using his full strength and there was almost no one who could escape from his sword. Xianxia quickly charged through the group of Saint Masters. Wherever he went, the people who belonged to the various large powers would fall to the ground. Quickly run! The group of people turned pale with fright. Like ants on a hot pan, they all fled in all directions. Bastard! Wu Yun, I will not forgive you. I will cut you into 10,000 pieces. Seeing the people who had died under Xianxia's sword, a few Saint Masters were flustered and exasperated. They flew into the crowd and chased after Xianxia. However, there were many people who belonged to their own powers. In such a dense crowd, the Saint Masters felt that their hands and feet were tied. It was impossible for them to be like Xianxia and kill without any fear. Everyone, scatter! Someone immediately shouted. However, his words were unnecessary. When Xianxia charged into the group of Saint Masters, they all began to run for their lives. However, with hundreds of people squeezed into the narrow street, it was impossible to escape in a short amount of time. Moreover, Xianxia's sword was incomparably fast, so only those who were far away from Xianxia were able to escape. As for those who were in front of him, they were all killed by Xianxia without exception. In just a few breaths of time, Xianxia had killed his way out of the encirclement of hundreds of people. Afterwards, he did not stop and immediately fled into the distance. Chapter 187. Seeing Xianxia's group gradually disappear from his sight, the city lord who was standing on a roof in the distance immediately let out a sigh of relief. He said, "They're finally gone. If we let them continue like this, who knows what would happen to my Phoenix City?" The words of the city lord caused the few people behind him to secretly nod their heads. Although Fengyang City was their territory and as a second-tier city, the number of troops they could control was in the hundreds of thousands. However, there was not just one faction gathered there. There were a total of over 10 factions from several nearby cities as well as Fengyang City itself. Every one of them was not to be trifled with. If they were to join forces, even the city lord of Fengyang City, who controlled hundreds of thousands of troops, would feel an extreme headache. I never thought that Wu Yun would actually possess a battle skill. I'm just too surprised. On the Tianyuan continent, even some Earth Saint Masters don't possess any battle skills. An old man behind the city lord sighed emotionally. His face was filled with envy. This Wu Yun's luck is really good. Not only did he pick up 2 Class 5 magical beast corpses for free, he even possesses a battle skill. I wonder where he got it from. This Wu Yun is not simple. I hope he doesn't have too great of a background. Otherwise, the clans that are hunting him down will be in for a bad time. Sigh, a man's wealth is his own ruin. Standing in the Phoenix City, the city lord sighed and immediately ordered, "Immediately notify the guards at the city gates. Let them leave the city without any obstructions." Xianxia quickly fled towards the city gates on the main street. Although Fengyang City was very large and there were many places where he could hide, there were still many spies within the city. Continuing to stay in Fengyang City was an extremely unwise choice. Right now, the best choice was to leave Fengyang City. In the open wilderness outside the city, his chances of escaping would be much higher. Xianxia was bleeding profusely from several wounds on his body. His clothes were completely dyed red. Now, he had no time to treat the wounds on his body. Escaping from here and keeping himself safe was the most important thing now. At times, Xianxia would run wildly on the streets, and at other times, he would use his qinggong to constantly jump on the buildings on both sides of the street. His speed had already surpassed the running speed of some low-level magical beasts. On the streets, the horses and magical beasts that were carrying their masters were constantly overtaken by Xianxia. Although Xianxia's speed was very fast, the group of great saint masters behind him were not much slower than Xianxia. Although they did not have a profound movement technique like Xianxia's, their saint force was definitely stronger than Xianxia's, making up for this shortcoming. Wu Yun, you can't escape. If you don't want to die, then stop obediently. Within the group of great saint masters who were chasing after them, there were people who continuously shouted out. The volume of their voices was so loud that it was deafening, spreading far into the distance. Even the people on the nearby streets could hear them clearly. The 30 great saint masters chased Xianxia through several streets. On the way, their loud voices naturally attracted the curiosity of the people on the streets. They all stopped and began to discuss with each other. Among the 30 great saint masters chasing behind him, a middle-aged man stared at the fleeing Xianxia and muttered in a low voice, "This Wu Yun's speed is really fast. Looking at the current situation, it's impossible to catch up to him in a short amount of time." Following that, the middle-aged man turned to the person beside him and said, "Third brother, among us, I'm afraid that only you can catch up to Wu Yun, and we definitely can't let Wu Yun escape. Why don't you go and stop him?" The person called third brother wore red clothes. He had a medium build, neither fat nor thin. Although he was already middle-aged, one could still tell from his appearance that when he was young, this person called third brother was definitely a handsome and confident person. Hearing that, the third brother stared at the fleeing Xianxia, and the scene of Xianxia killing several great saint masters immediately appeared in his mind. A trace of hesitation appeared in his eyes. Second brother, although this Wu Yun only has the strength of a high-level saint master, he has a battle skill. Didn't you see that a few great saint masters were killed in a single exchange? I'm afraid that I'm not his opponent by myself. When he thought of the scene of Xianxia killing great saint masters in a single exchange, the third brother's heart began to palpitate. Third brother, although you only have the strength of a low-level great saint master, don't forget that you have wind-attributed saint force. You have a great advantage in terms of speed, and Wu Yun's greatest advantage is his speed. He's so fast that we have to be careful, and you just happen to be his nemesis. The middle-aged man said, "Second brother, although I have wind-attributed saint force, my contract with wind is extremely low. I've seen Xianxia's sword speed, and it's definitely faster than mine. I really don't have the confidence to face him." The third brother's face was filled with difficulty. The middle-aged man sighed. The fact that the third brother was so afraid of death made him feel a trace of displeasure. "Third brother, don't you see that we have so many people chasing after him? You only need to stop him for a short period of time. Once Wu Yun is surrounded by us again, it'll be very difficult for him to escape. At that time, I'll immediately take off Wu Yun's spatial belt and give it to you. Take it and run immediately. With your speed, if you burst out with your full strength, there aren't many people here who can catch up to you." Hearing those words, the third brother hesitated for a moment before finally agreeing, "All right, second brother, I'll go stop Wu Yun right now. You guys have to catch up as soon as possible." "Don't worry, third brother. Whether or not we'll be able to snatch the battle skill from the hands of so many people will all depend on you." The middle-aged man patted third brother's shoulder and whispered into his ear. There was a hint of excitement in his tone. According to his thoughts, if this plan succeeded, There was an 80 to 90% chance that the combat skills and the 2 Class 5 monster cores would fall into their hands. Xianxia had already been running for an incense stick's worth of time. Under his full strength, his speed was much faster than riding a horse. In a short period of time, he had already covered 40 kilometers. At this moment, he was already getting closer and closer to the gates of Phoenix City. Right at this moment, among the 30 great Saint Masters chasing after him, a green light suddenly flashed. A figure wrapped in a faint green light suddenly shot out, and his speed suddenly increased. In the blink of an eye, he surpassed the surrounding great Saint Masters and quickly rushed towards Xianxia. Chapter 188. Wind-attributed Saint Force cultivators had an absolute advantage in terms of speed. If a great Saint Master had wind-attributed Saint Force, then even an Earth Saint Master would have a hard time surpassing him in speed. Although Xianxia's movement technique was also extraordinary, with his current strength as a high-level Saint Master, his speed was at most comparable to a high-level Great Saint Master. If he faced a Great Saint Master with wind attribute Saint Force, there was no way he could escape. The Great Saint Master with wind attributed Saint Force was extremely fast. In just a few breaths of time, he had caught up to Xianxia. His large sword flickered with a faint green light as if it was enveloped by a layer of wind. It turned into a green light as it slashed towards Xianxia's back. Xianxia's eyes flashed. He was currently about 500 meters away from the group of Great Saint Masters. Before they caught up, he had to quickly take care of this Great Saint Master with wind-attributed Saint Force. Otherwise, if he were to be surrounded by dozens of Great Saint Masters again, then it would not be easy to escape. The silver light wind sword appeared in Xianxia's hands in an instant. Carrying an extremely sharp sword chi, it pierced backwards like lightning. Ding! The large sword and the light wind sword collided with each other. This time, it was clear that both of them had used their full strength. The powerful Saint Force contained within the Saint weapons collided with each other, creating a visible ripple of energy that quickly spread out in all directions. All the buildings that were affected by the ripple of energy suffered varying degrees of damage. There were even a few unlucky mercenaries that were selling low-level monster cores that were sent flying backwards by the ripple of energy. Mother, there are actually people fighting here. That faint green light, it's actually wind-attributed Saint Force. Hurry up and get away. These two people are both experts. If we get caught up in the ripple of energy, then the unlucky ones will be us. The city guards are about to arrive. The fight between the two caused the originally quiet street to become chaotic in an instant. Some of the weaker pedestrians hurriedly distanced themselves from the two to avoid being affected. The light wind sword in Xianxia's hand continued to stab out, each strike faster than the previous one. At this time, he had to kill this Wind Saint Force user as quickly as possible. Unfortunately, a Great Saint Master with the wind attribute wasn't as easy to kill as a normal Great Saint Master. Under Xianxia's concentrated attacks, this Great Saint Master with the wind attribute found it difficult to deal with, but at least he wasn't forced to the point of being flustered. Even though Xianxia's sword was absolutely faster than his dodging speed and attack speed, this Great Saint Master only had the idea of stalling Xianxia. Under his blindly defending situation, it was really difficult for Xianxia to kill him in a short period of time. After stalling for a while, the group of Great Saint Masters behind him had already caught up. Seeing the group of Great Saint Masters quickly closing in on him, Xianxia gritted his teeth and gave up on his opponent. He stomped on the ground and continued to run towards the city gates. As soon as Xianxia started to run, the Great Saint Master with the wind attribute immediately chased after him, not giving Xianxia a chance to escape. Under this kind of entanglement, Xianxia was quickly surrounded by a group of Great Saint Masters. Wu Yun, let's see where you'll run to this time. Although the group of Great Saint Masters didn't belong to the same faction, at this moment, all of them were working together to deal with Xianxia. Not only were there people on the ground, there were also people standing on top of the surrounding buildings to prevent Xianxia from escaping through the air. Seeing the group of Great Saint Masters surrounding him again, Xianxia's expression became very serious. After blocking the attacks of several people, he leapt into the air, leaving behind afterimages as he entered a restaurant on the side of the street. Shwa shwa shwa. Following the flickering of several silhouettes, several great Saint Masters immediately followed closely behind and entered the restaurant. Meanwhile, the rest of the people also surrounded the entire restaurant. Inside the restaurant, when several sacred masters had just entered, they suddenly saw a flash of white light. A thin and narrow longsword already shot over from the side with extreme speed, stabbing towards one of them like lightning. Careful! Although they were immediately noticed, the speed of the sword was extremely fast. Adding on the fact that they didn't expect Xianxia to be surrounded by so many people, it was already too late for them to react. Pooh! The light wind sword pierced through one of the people's throat. Another great Saint Master was killed by Xianxia. After that, Xianxia immediately pulled out the light wind sword and began to fight with the rest of the people. The tables and chairs in the restaurant were quite damaged because of the fight between the two sides. Fortunately, it wasn't the peak time for eating yet, so the restaurant was quite empty. Aside from a few waiters, there weren't many people eating. As for the few people who were eating in the restaurant, when they saw Xianxia and the others fighting, they immediately hid far away. Xianxia was fiercely fighting with the great Saint Masters at the entrance of the restaurant. The space here was very small, so Xianxia didn't have to face enemies from all sides like outside. Thus, fighting in here made the pressure on Xianxia a bit less. Sirs, I beg of you to go outside and fight. My small restaurant can't withstand your torment. The well-dressed shopkeeper had a long face as he begged the people around him. As for the other waiter, they had already run to the foot of the restaurant and were squatting there, not daring to say a word. Boom boom. At this time, two loud sounds rang out, and the entire wall of the restaurant suddenly collapsed. A few more great Saint Masters rushed in from outside and attacked Xianxia. Xianxia's expression slightly changed. At this time, there were already 10 great Saint Masters in the restaurant. Facing 10 great Saint Masters at the same time was very taxing for him. Xianxia didn't want to continue fighting. His feet stomped on the ground, and his entire body shot up. He directly smashed through the wooden floor of the restaurant, creating a large hole in it, and went up to the second floor. Chase! The 10 great Saint Masters also smashed through the wooden floor of the restaurant and rushed up to the second floor. However, when one of them had just reached the second floor and didn't even have time to look around, the sound of something breaking through the air came from behind him. In an instant he was stabbed in the neck from behind. Immediately after, the silver-white sword flashed again and stabbed into the throat of another person not far away. In just a short moment, Xianxia used this perfect opportunity to kill the two of them with lightning-like speed. At this time, the rest of the people also reacted. When they saw what happened to the two people, they all broke out in a cold sweat. However, they secretly rejoiced in their hearts. Fortunately, Xianxia's target wasn't them. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to survive in this kind of situation. Right now, there's only about half of the saint force in my body left. If I use my full strength like this, I won't be able to last much longer. Right now, I need to preserve my strength and escape. I can't continue to be entangled with them. If I even use up the strength to escape, then it seems like I'm going to die here today. Xianxia quickly made a plan in his mind. Right now, everyone was already on guard. He had already lost the good opportunity to make a move as easily as before. And if this kind of method was used a second time, it wouldn't work at all. How could a person who had suffered a loss a second time suffer a loss? Chapter 189. Just as Xianxia reached the mouth of the well, a white object suddenly shot out from the window of the second floor of the restaurant, directly towards Xianxia. Xianxia stabbed the white object with his sword. Immediately, a large amount of white powder erupted from the white object, instantly enveloping Xianxia. However, Xianxia wasn't worried at all. He allowed the white powder to touch his body. His body was immune to poison. Although it hadn't reached perfection, he was immune to most poisons in the world. Xianxia directly punched the stone slab covering the mouth of the well. With a boom, the palm-thick stone slab was directly smashed into pieces by Xianxia, revealing the dark mouth of the well. Then, without any hesitation, Xianxia immediately jumped in. In the back courtyard of the restaurant, people continuously flew in from all directions. In the end, they all gathered at the mouth of the well. There were a total of 28 people. Of the 30 or so great saint masters that had surrounded Xianxia, there were only 28 people left. Staring at the dark mouth of the well, a black-robed old man said in a deep voice, "What a cunning fellow! He actually jumped into the well. What should we do now?" Staring at the dark mouth of the well, a black-robed old man said with an extremely ugly expression, "All the wells in Phoenix Sun City are connected. There are tens of thousands of wells in Phoenix Sun City that are connected to a huge reservoir below. He can definitely escape to any place in Phoenix Sun City through this well." A bare-chested, dark-skinned man said in a deep voice. He belonged to the Haiming clan, a local power of Phoenix Sun City. Thus, he was much more clear about the situation than the other powers. "Then what should we do now? Should we chase down this well?" An old man muttered to himself. He couldn't make up his mind. "I don't think so. Although Wu Yun only has the strength of a great saint master, I believe that everyone has seen his battle strength with their own eyes. On the ground, even if 2 or 3 of us work together, we still wouldn't be his opponent. If we enter the water, not only will our movements be greatly hindered, our vision will also be greatly affected. If we chase down this well, I'm afraid that not only will we not be able to catch him, we will also lose a lot of people." The one who spoke was a middle-aged man. He wore a luxurious white robe with golden edges. His entire body emitted a noble aura. An old man with an aquiline nose sighed heavily and said with a bit of unwillingness, "Don't tell me that we are going to let him escape just like that. The battle skill he has is definitely an extremely profound one. It can actually allow a great Saint Master's speed to reach such a high level. Even with so many of us working together, we still can't catch him. That's right, it's rare to meet such a weak person with a battle skill. For us, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. We definitely can't let it go so easily. At most, after we obtain the battle skill, we can all comprehend the mysteries within it. This way, it will be beneficial for all of us. Finally, those 2 fifth-step monster cores, although they are also very precious, compared to the battle skill, they are far too lacking. Those profound battle skills are not something that can be bought with money alone." A middle-aged man wearing a white robe said. This person was a member of the Muda family. "That's right, we can't easily give up on this battle skill. However, Wu Yun has already jumped into the well. Through this well, he can reach any place in Phoenix Sun City. Phoenix Sun City is so big, it's not that easy for us to find a single person in the boundless sea of people. I think we should take advantage of the fact that he hasn't escaped far and quickly chase after him. The situation at the bottom of the well is unclear. Furthermore, it's dark, who knows where Wu Yun is hiding right now, waiting for us to take the bait. This is too dangerous." A group of people started to discuss spiritedly. Regarding this battle skill, everyone's hearts were filled with jealousy. They were determined to obtain it, but everyone was greedy for life and afraid of death. They were all worried that they would encounter something bad in the well. After all, none of them were fools. They all knew one thing, although a battle skill was precious, if they were to lose their lives, then no matter how profound the battle skill was, they wouldn't be able to enjoy it. Hearing the discussions of the crowd, an old man wearing a linen robe revealed a smile on his face. He slowly raised his left hand and a small snake with the thickness of a finger came out from his sleeve. The old man stretched out his hand and gently stroked the small snake's head. He slowly said, "Everyone, don't worry, Wu Yun won't be able to escape." His tone was filled with confidence. The entire underground of Phoenix Sun City was a natural reservoir. It was connected to all the wells in Phoenix Sun City, providing the entire city with water. At this moment, in the underground reservoir, a figure was nimbly shuttling back and forth like a fish. It was Xianxia who had jumped into the well in the backyard of the restaurant. Because he was underground, the surrounding space was completely dark. Adding the water blocking his vision, he couldn't even see his 5 fingers if he stretched out his hand. Xianxia followed the map in his mind and quickly swam in a certain direction. Although it was so dark that he couldn't even see his 5 fingers, Jianshan relied on his powerful spirit to faintly sense a radius of 1 zhang. After staying in Phoenix Sun City for the past few days, Jianshan had also explored the environment of Phoenix Sun City. This kind of escape method was something that Jianshan had planned long ago. Once he fell into a desperate situation where he couldn't escape, he would use the method of jumping into a well to escape. Through this underground reservoir that was connected to all the wells in Phoenix Sun City, he could reach any place in Phoenix Sun City that had a well. With Jianshan's current strength as a high-level Saint Master, holding his breath for a long period of time was as simple as eating a meal for him. Even if he stayed in the water for a few hours without breathing, there wouldn't be any problems. Jianshan swam in the underground reservoir for 6 hours. When he was about 20 kilometers away from his previous location, he swam upwards. After searching for a while, he finally found a 2-meter-wide tunnel and rushed out of the water. As soon as his head came out of the water, Jianshan took in large mouthfuls of fresh air. After 6 hours of holding his breath, even Jianshan felt a bit tired. After catching his breath, Jianshan slammed his palms against the water and shot towards the well like a cannonball. Somersaulting in the air, Jianshan landed next to the crystal. He didn't even have time to wipe off the water that was dripping from his hair as he carefully looked around. This was a small courtyard. Not far away, there were a few clothes that had been washed and dried. The surrounding area was empty, and there wasn't a single person in sight. Good thing there's no one here. From the looks of it, this should be the backyard of a small family. Jianshan combed his wet hair and used the light wind sword to remove all of it, leaving only a few inches of hair. I wonder what the situation outside is like. I'm afraid that the local powers have already sent a large number of people to look for me. This place isn't too far from the restaurant, so I should leave this place immediately. Jianshan immediately began to dress up. His previous appearance had already been washed clean by the water in the underground reservoir, so at this moment, he had returned to his original appearance. His head of wet hair, coupled with his handsome face, gave him a unique charm. Jianshan didn't hesitate and circulated his Saint Qi to dry the water on his body. He immediately took out a set of clothes from his spatial belt and changed into them. As for the wounds on his body, he didn't have the time to treat them, so he wrapped them up with a few strips of cloth. After all, this was someone else's backyard. Who knew when the owner would return? If the owner found out that there was a stranger in their backyard, it would definitely cause some trouble. Thus, it wasn't wise to stay here for long. The sooner he left, the better. Only after completing all his preparations and confirming that he had not missed anything did Jianshan leave the courtyard. After passing through a few small alleys, he finally arrived on a crowded street. After identifying the location, he continued to make his way to the city gates at a steady pace. Chapter 190. I heard that there are people fighting in the city not far from the Heavenly Phoenix auction house. I don't know who is so daring to actually fight in the city. Are they tired of living? Once they are caught by the city guards, the punishment will be extremely severe. Yeah, I also heard that it was a group of people surrounding and attacking a person. Moreover, a life was lost. What do you guys know? I came from that street. Let me tell you, those people who are fighting are all experts. Moreover, they all have great backgrounds. Even the city guards don't dare to provoke them. They fought their way over and not a single city guard went to stop them. Yeah, I also heard that those people all have the strength of a great Saint Master. That person who is being chased is really powerful. Facing so many great Saint Masters by himself, not only was he able to escape, he even killed quite a few people. Could the person who is being surrounded by a group of great Saint Masters be an Earth Saint Master? He is actually so powerful. Perhaps it was because Jianshan's fight with a group of great Saint Masters was too sensational, causing the news to spread very quickly. Walking on the street, Jianshan could hear the discussions of passers-by everywhere. As Jianshan listened to the discussions of the passers-by, he continued to walk in the direction of the city gate. After walking for less than the time it takes to brew a cup of tea, suddenly, several powerful auras came from far behind him. Feeling the sudden auras, Jianshan's figure slightly paused. When he turned around to look, he could faintly see quite a few people on the roofs of the houses on both sides of the street. They were quickly leaping in his direction. Moreover, there were quite a few familiar faces among them. They were the great Saint Masters who had chased after him before. Xianxian's face slightly changed. He suddenly had a bad premonition in his heart. What's going on? Did they discover me? Or are they just passing by on the way? Looking at their appearance, it clearly doesn't seem like they are in a hurry. Could it be that I've really been discovered? No, that's impossible. My current appearance is no longer Wu Yun's appearance. They can't possibly recognize me. For a moment, Xianxian could not make up his mind. Right now, he and Wu Yun were like two different people. Other than the few wounds on his body that had not been treated in time, no one could tell that he was Wu Yun. And those wounds had been bandaged by him and covered by his clothes. From the outside, no one could tell that he was Wu Yun. And seeing the group of people behind him coming in with such ferocious momentum, Xianxian felt a little apprehensive. Perhaps they didn't come for me. They should have something else on their minds. That's why they're in such a rush. Especially at a time like this, all the more I can't panic. If I were to run now, wouldn't it mean that there's something wrong with me? Xianxian thought inwardly. He forcefully calmed himself down and continued to walk in the direction of the city gate. But right now, his walking speed was a bit faster than before. Previously, he managed to escape from the encirclement with great difficulty. Right now, he didn't want to fall into it again. But at this time, he definitely couldn't panic. On the other hand, Xianxian was also very confident in his appearance. Right now, he was no longer Wu Yun, but Xianxian. Very quickly, the group of great Saint Masters behind him leaped over the roofs of the houses on both sides of Xianxian. Their speed did not decrease in the slightest. Seeing this scene, Xianxian's heart that was in his throat finally calmed down. Fortunately, these people did not see through his identity. However, right when an old man passed by Xianxian, his expression suddenly changed. He suddenly turned his head and stared at Xianxian, who was standing in the middle of the crowd. He loudly shouted, "Found him! Just here! Quickly surround him!" Before his voice even finished, he already jumped off the roof. In the end, he landed 5 meters away from Xianxian. He vigilantly stared at him, carefully taking precautions. Even if he was only facing a high-level Saint Master, this old man with the strength of a great Saint Master didn't dare to be the slightest bit careless. He had personally witnessed the scene of Xianxian killing several great Saint Masters. When the rest of the great Saint Masters heard this old man's words, they immediately turned around and shot towards the old man's position. In the blink of an eye, they surrounded Xianxian. This sudden change also made Xianxian slightly stunned. His heart immediately sank, but his expression did not change in the slightest. He cupped his hands towards everyone and said with a smile, "Brothers, I wonder what you all are." Xianxian still didn't dare to believe that his identity would be seen through. He was extremely confident in his own appearance. His current appearance and Wu Yun's face that looked like he was in his 40s could be said to have undergone an earth-shattering change. Moreover, even his hair had been intentionally trimmed. There was not the slightest bit of similarity between the two. The 20 or so great Saint Masters that surrounded Xianxian looked at Xianxian's face that clearly didn't seem to be more than 20 years old. Their expressions were all filled with confusion. "Elder He Mu, are you looking for the wrong person?" A white-robed middle-aged man said to an old man. "Yeah, Elder He Mu, you're looking for the wrong person. How is this Wu Yun?" As soon as the white-robed middle-aged man finished speaking, another large man spoke in a low muffled voice. His voice was filled with dissatisfaction. The old man that was called Elder He Mu carefully sized up Xianxian. His eyes were filled with confusion as he thought to himself, "Could it be that I've really found the wrong person?" Just as this thought appeared in Elder He Mu's mind, a small snake that was only as thick as a finger shot out from Elder He Mu's sleeve. The snake raised its head high and continuously spat at Xianxian. Seeing this scene, Elder He Mu was slightly shocked. His eyes were filled with disbelief as he stared at Xianxian, who didn't seem to be more than 20 years old. He cried out in surprise, "You're Wu Yun." Hearing Elder He Mu's cry of surprise, The other 20 great Saint Masters also revealed a trace of shock. Their eyes were filled with disbelief as they looked at Jianshan. Elder He Mu, are you sure you didn't get the wrong person? The red-robed old man still didn't dare to confirm. Elder He Mu didn't answer the red-robed old man's question. He sneered and said to Jianshan, Wu Yun, your ability to change your appearance is truly great. You actually made it so that none of us could recognize you. However, no matter how you change, you still won't be able to escape the senses of my spirit snake. Jianshan's expression also became a bit serious. Elder He Mu clearly had a secret method to find out his identity. Right now, there was no way for him to avoid it. Hearing Elder He Mu's confident words, the 20 great Saint Masters all felt extremely shocked. However, they didn't slow down at all. They all took out their own saint weapons and surrounded Jianshan. However, no one dared to make the first move. Jianshan's gaze swept through the surroundings before landing on Elder He Mu in the end. He said, Just how did you find me? Old man He Mu revealed a slightly complacent expression when he heard that. He said, There's no harm in telling you. When you jumped into the well earlier, I sprinkled a special medicinal powder on you. The spiritual snake in my hand is extremely sensitive to this medicinal powder. As long as you're within 50 kilometers, I'll be able to find you through this spiritual snake. Jianshan came to a realization and continued, Could it be that I can't wash off the powder even if I enter the water? Chapter 191. So that's how it is. Jianshan's face became gloomy. According to what Elder He Mu had said, if he didn't get rid of the 100 miles shadow powder, then he definitely wouldn't be able to escape from Elder He Mu's pursuit. Right now, the only way was to kill the spirit snake in Elder He Mu's hand. The safest way was to get rid of Elder He Mu. Only then would he have a chance of escaping. Thinking up to this point, Jianshan's eyes flashed with killing intent. Without wasting any more words, the silver-white light wind sword appeared in his hand and shot towards Elder He Mu. Elder He Mu gave a sinister smile. He was already prepared for Jianshan's sudden attack and immediately retreated. At the same time, a meter-long scepter appeared in his hand and blocked Jianshan's attack. Everyone attacked together. This time, be careful. We definitely can't let him escape. Just as Jianshan made his move, the other 20 great Saint Masters also leapt into the air. In the air, all of them brandished their swords at Jianshan. 20 sword chi broke free from their saint weapons and shot towards Jianshan. The light wind sword suddenly exploded with a strong sword chi. The hazy sword chi was so dense that it completely covered the light wind sword. Soon after, Jianshan waved the light wind sword, creating an impenetrable net of sword chi that blocked the incoming sword chi. Boom, 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 boom. Following a series of explosions, the area where Jianshan was standing was instantly covered by the sword chi. The sword chi's shockwaves shot towards the ground, filling the air with dust. As soon as the 20 or so great Saint Masters landed on the ground, the 8 strongest people immediately brandished the saint weapons in their hands and chopped at the dust cloud with all their strength. As for the others, they carefully guarded the surroundings to prevent Jianshan from escaping again. Right when the 8 sacred masters' sacred weapons were about to hack down on that area filled with smoke and dust, suddenly, a silver-white streak of light shot out from the smoke and dust. The speed of this silver-white streak of light was unimaginably fast, as if it was flying alone in the air. Without anyone controlling it, it quickly circled around those 8 people once before disappearing from sight. Only a shallow line of blood was left on the 8 great Saint Masters' necks. Meanwhile, at the same time, the bodies of the 8 great Saint Masters suddenly froze. Soon after, specks of dark red gradually appeared from their necks, moreover quickly expanding. Soon after, from the necks of the 8 great Saint Masters, bright red blood surged out like fountains. In the end, the 8 of them simultaneously collapsed onto the ground. A white figure shot out from the dust that had yet to disperse. Jianshan did not even bother with the great Saint Masters. He shot past them and charged towards Elder He Mu. Ying. The light wind sword carried a sharp sword chi as it pierced through the air. The sharp tip of the light wind sword made a sound as it pierced through the air, heading straight for Old Man Himu. Towards Jianshan's sneak attack, Elder Himu had always been on guard. At this critical moment, Elder Himu's face didn't reveal the slightest trace of panic. His body once again retreated, and at the same time, he did his best to twist his neck to the side. At the same time, he used the cane in his hand to strike the light wind sword. Ding! The cane and the light wind sword collided with each other, creating a muffled sound. The light wind sword had been knocked to the side by the cane, but Jianshan's sword was extremely fast. The light wind sword immediately followed up and swept towards the cane. Poof! Jianshan's light wind sword swept past Elder Himu's neck. Elder Himu was a great saint master, but under Jianshan's full strength attack, he was killed in a few moves. At this time, a large sword came from behind and fiercely chopped down on Jianshan's back. Jianshan's entire body was chopped down by the large sword, causing him to stagger forward a few steps. On his back, a half-meter-long wound had appeared. It was so deep that his bones could be seen. Bright red blood surged out from the wound and quickly dyed Jianshan's clothes red. Seeing that Jianshan had been injured, the eyes of the people who were guarding the perimeter lit up. They immediately rushed towards Jianshan. The people who were closest to him took a few steps forward and arrived in front of Jianshan. 3 saint weapons came slashing towards Jianshan from different directions. "Since you want to die, then I'll help you." Jianshan's face revealed a trace of malevolence. Now that he had been injured again and again, not only did it affect his battle prowess, but it also affected his battle prowess. Furthermore, after using his full strength for so long, his Saint Chi was almost completely depleted. If he wanted to escape, then he would have to use his final trump card. Suddenly, an even sharper sword Chi surged out from the light wind sword. Immediately after, the light wind sword left Jianshan's hand and flew out like a bolt of lightning. It collided with the 3 saint weapons that were about to hit Jianshan's body. Ding ding ding! Following the sound of metal colliding, the light wind sword's incredible speed gave it a powerful force. When the 3 saint weapons collided with the light wind sword's powerful force caused the 3 saint weapons to retreat a few steps. Their faces turned pale as they looked at their saint weapons in shock. At the place where the light wind sword had collided with their saint weapons, there was already a small crack. Although it was just a small crack, the impact it brought to the 3 of them was incomparably huge. Their own saint weapons had actually been damaged. Furthermore, their saint weapons were connected to their masters. Now that their saint weapons were damaged, the 3 of them also received a certain amount of damage. So, the light wind sword pierced through the air and continued to fly towards the remaining saint weapons. Its speed was inconceivably fast, almost like a real bolt of lightning. Under Jianshan's control, the light wind sword blocked the saint weapons of the remaining 20 saint masters and then went straight for their throats. Poof, poof, poof. In just one picture, 7 saint masters had their throats slit by the light wind sword. Seeing this scene, the faces of the remaining saint masters changed greatly. They hurriedly waved their weapons to block the light wind sword's attack. Bastard, what kind of attack is this? How can the sword fly by itself? And its speed is so terrifying. After narrowly blocking one of the light wind sword's attacks, a pale-faced saint master couldn't help but curse out loud. Looking at the weapon in his hand, he saw that there was already a small crack in it. When the rest of the saint masters saw the light wind sword flying in the air, they were all shocked. To them, this scene was simply inconceivable. Facing Jianshan's light wind sword, the remaining saint masters were only able to hold on for a few breaths of time before dying. On the ground, there were already 20 saint masters who had their throats slit by the light wind sword. At this moment, the remaining great saint masters were completely frightened out of their wits. They no longer had any thoughts of fighting and fled as quickly as they could. One of them was even covered in a layer of faint green wind-attributed saint force. In just a few flashes, he had already fled 100 meters away. His speed was extremely fast. So, Jianshan didn't plan on letting them go. The light wind sword turned into a bolt of lightning as it chased after them. In the blink of an eye, Jianshan had caught up with the wind saint force user who was the fastest to escape. In the end, the light wind sword pierced through his throat. After killing the Saint Masters, the light wind sword circled in the air once before turning back and continuing to shoot towards the remaining Saint Masters. Facing the light wind sword's incomparable speed, none of the remaining Saint Masters were able to escape. In the end, they all died under the light wind sword. Chapter 192. P.S. I don't know what happened yesterday, but there was a power outage for an entire day. I couldn't write at all, so I couldn't update. Sorry, I started writing this chapter in the wee hours of the morning. The corpses of over 20 great Saint Masters were strewn all over the ground. Their blood dyed the entire street red. Around 100 meters away, countless people had gathered to watch the show. Every single one of them had their eyes wide open as they stared dumbfoundedly at the blood-soaked Xianxia and the 20 great Saint Masters lying on the ground. Their faces were filled with disbelief, and their hearts were filled with shock. Among them, there were quite a few people with extraordinary eyesight. With a single glance, they could see that the 20 or so people all had the strength of a great Saint Master. With 20 or so great Saint Masters gathered together, they formed a powerful force that was enough to sweep through the entire second-class city of Fengyang City. But who would have thought that so many great Saint Masters would actually all die in such a short period of time at the hands of a young man who didn't even seem to be in his 20s? If they hadn't seen this scene with their own eyes, they probably wouldn't have believed it no matter what. Even so, the scene in front of them was still hard for them to accept. They felt that it was so unreal, as if it was a dream. It was so fake. Xianxia's gaze slowly swept over the 20 or so great Saint Master corpses on the ground. His breathing was a bit hurried. The continuous battles had caused his saint force to be severely depleted, causing him to feel a bit tired. However, Xianxia also understood that he couldn't stay here for long. The Class 5 Magical Beast's corpse had attracted quite a few people. Right now, Fengyang City was the most chaotic time. Although on the surface, there were more than 10 forces that weren't weak, in the dark, there were probably some mercenary groups and lone wolves that had their eyes on him. After all, he was currently injured, and his battle strength wasn't as good as when he was at his peak. Adding on the temptation of Class 5 Magical Beast cores and battle skills, it was enough to make some people dizzy. Although Xianxia could easily kill a great Saint Master with the Divine Sword Manipulation Technique, using the Divine Sword Manipulation Technique would greatly deplete his saint force. This wasn't a long-term plan. The only thing he could do right now was to immediately leave Fengyang City. To Xianxia, the current Fengyang City was countless times more dangerous than when he was in the wilderness. At this time, Xianxia's gaze landed on the Saint Master's spatial belts. His eyes couldn't help but light up. With a flick of his light wind sword, he collected all of their spatial belts into his hand. What made Xianxia even happier was the fact that he had actually discovered 3 spatial rings. Spatial rings were extremely valuable. They were far more valuable than a spatial belt. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that a spatial ring was a symbol of status and strength in the Tianyuan continent. It wasn't as common as a spatial belt, where anyone could have one. Although a spatial belt was divided into different grades, it couldn't be compared to a spatial ring. Xianxia put away the 20 spatial belts and 2 spatial rings. In front of so many people, Xianxia didn't have the time to check what was inside and immediately left. Seeing Xianxia walk over, the people who had gathered to watch the show seemed to have woken up from a dream. Their faces were filled with fear as they parted to let Xianxia pass. Xianxia held the light wind sword that was still dripping with blood as he walked out of the crowd. Wherever he went, the people would give way to him. Even though Xianxia had a youthful face, no one dared to look down on him. Arriving before the mount of a Class 1 magical beast, Xianxia stopped. He fished out a few amethyst coins from his space belt and handed them to the owner. He said coldly, "I'll buy your mount." After saying that, Xianxia didn't wait for the magical beast's owner to agree and directly jumped onto the magical beast. Pulling on the reins, he quickly rode the magical beast towards the city gates. The magical beast's owner was only a mercenary with the strength of a Saint Master. After seeing Xianxia kill 20 Saint Masters with his own eyes, he didn't dare to show any dissatisfaction towards Xianxia's rude behavior. Not to mention that Xianxia had already paid him far more than the magical beast's worth. Even if Xianxia forcefully took the magical beast away from him, the magical beast's owner wouldn't dare to complain. Riding on the magical beast, Xianxia rushed towards the city gates. After a stick of incense worth of time, he finally saw the faintly discernible tall city walls in front of him. But fortunately, nothing happened that Xianxia didn't want to see. Although Phoenix Sun City didn't have the top powers in the surrounding cities, there were still quite a few powerful mercenary groups and some lone rangers. Originally, these people also wanted to get involved. After all, the temptation of 2 rank 5 magical beast cores and a high-level battle skill was too great. But when they received the news that 30 Saint Masters had already died in Xianxia's hands, it was as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over their heads, causing them to immediately give up on the idea of surrounding Xianxia. In the distance, when the guards on the city walls saw Xianxia riding a Class 1 magical beast and drenched in blood, they immediately shouted something to the people below. The soldiers below the city walls also immediately made way for the people entering and exiting the city, making way for Xianxia. It was obvious that they had already received orders from the city lord of Phoenix Sun City. In the heart of the Phoenix Sun City city lord, he couldn't wait for Xianxia to be sent out of the city as soon as possible. After all, if he continued to stay here, then the powers that would be attracted to him wouldn't be easy to provoke. Even the Phoenix Sun City's city lord didn't want to offend him. Seeing this scene, Xianxia didn't slow down at all. He still maintained his high speed as he rushed toward the city gates. In the end, under the astonished gazes of a group of people, he rushed out of the city gates with a gust of wind. After leaving the city gates, Xianxia finally let out a sigh of relief. To him, the wilderness was much safer than Phoenix Sun City. After all, here, he wouldn't be harassed by an endless amount of enemies, especially the local powers of Phoenix Sun City, who knew just how strong they were and whether or not there were Earth Saint Masters hidden among them. Moreover, he had killed quite a few of their Saint Masters. Those local powers definitely wouldn't let him go so easily. If he continued to stay in Phoenix Sun City, then he would have to face their endless harassment. Mr. Wu Yun really is skilled. I didn't think that you would be so strong at such a young age. This should be the effect of that battle skill. Just when Xianxia was about 10 kilometers away from Phoenix Sun City, a somewhat old but full of energy voice suddenly rang out from behind him. Hearing this voice, Xianxia's expression suddenly changed. He immediately turned around and saw that about 5 kilometers away, a figure was chasing after him at an extremely fast speed. That speed was so fast that it was much faster than the magical beast that Xianxia was riding. Chapter 193. Sir, don't tell me you want the 2 Class 5 monster cores on me as well? Xianxia's voice boomed out, echoing through the surroundings and spreading far and wide. Hee, Class 5 monster cores may be precious, but they're nothing to me. Wu Yun, I want your battle skill. Give it to me and I won't make things difficult for you. The old man's voice rang out from afar, clearly reaching Xianxia's ears. In just a few seconds, the old man had closed the distance between Xianxia and the old man. From the initial 5 kilometers, he was now only 4 kilometers away. Xianxia's face became extremely ugly when he saw the old man's terrifying speed. Without any hesitation, he immediately leapt off the back of the Class 1 magical beast and began to run as fast as he could. Although this would drain his saint force, the speed of a Class 1 magical beast was much slower than his full speed. If he continued to remain on the back of the magical beast, the old man would probably catch up to him very soon. Xianxia ran as fast as he could on the ground. The violent movements of his body tore at the terrifying wound on his back. The heart-wrenching pain caused Xianxia's facial muscles to constantly twitch. His face had already become rather pale as beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. If he had been struck in the back by a sword, the pain would not have been so intense. However, the violent movements of his body tore at his back, causing the wound on his back to expand at almost all times. The pain from his muscles slowly tearing apart was basically devastating to his nerves. Xianxia endured the intense pain on his back as he ran as fast as he could. Although he had not clashed with the old man, Xianxia felt an unprecedented threat from him. The old man was definitely terrifyingly powerful. The old man behind him could not help but sneer as he watched Xianxia flee. He said, "Wu Yun, you're just wasting your energy like this. You won't be able to escape from me." With that, the old man's speed suddenly increased by another 30%. The distance between him and Xianxia quickly closed. 4 kilometers, 3 kilometers, 2 kilometers, the old man was extremely fast. In less than 10 minutes, he had closed the distance between him and Xianxia from 5 kilometers to 1 kilometer. Even though Xianxia had already increased his speed to the limit, he was still unable to shake off the old man. Moreover, using his movement technique to escape with all his strength was extremely taxing on Xianxia's saint force. In the end, when the old man was less than 500 meters away from him, Xianxia finally stopped. He turned around and stared at the old man while panting slightly. Seeing that Xianxia had stopped running, the old man also slowed down. In the end, he stood still 20 meters away from Xianxia. He had a seemingly amiable smile on his face, but his eyes were filled with curiosity and surprise as he sized up Xianxia. "Wu Yun, that shouldn't be your real name, right? However, that is no longer important to me. However, the fact that you were able to kill over 30 great Saint Masters with the strength of a high-level Saint Master has truly shocked me," the old man said with a smile on his face. His tone was amiable. Hearing the old man's amiable voice, Xianxia frowned slightly. This voice gave him a faint sense of familiarity, as if he had heard it somewhere before. Immediately, Xianxia's mind flashed as he suddenly thought of a person. He immediately said in a deep voice, "Old mister, if my guess is correct, you should belong to the Herido clan of Yellow Earth City, right?" Xianxia had a very deep impression of the Herido clan. During the Heavenly Phoenix auction, the people who had gathered over 10 of the strongest powers from the surrounding cities actually didn't dare to compete with the Herido clan for the corpse of a Class 5 magical beast. Moreover, all of them were willing to give the first Class 5 magical beast corpse to the Herido clan. In the end, the Herido clan only had to spend a small amount of money to obtain the precious Class 5 magical beast corpse. From that moment on, Xianxia had already understood that the Herido clan was probably extremely powerful. At the very least, all the powers that could be called hegemons from different places were extremely fearful of the Herido clan. The old man nodded slightly and said, "Correct, old man is indeed a member of the Herido clan. Wu Yun, I only want your battle skill. As for the 2 Class 5 monster cores, I won't touch you." Seeing the flickering light in Xianxia's eyes, the old man gently snorted and continued, "Wu Yun, you should hand over the battle skill. Old man isn't as easy to deal with as those great Saint Masters. In front of an Earth Saint Master, a high-level Saint Master like you has no chance of escaping." Earth Saint Master. Hearing that, Xianxia sucked in a cold breath. Although he had already guessed that the old man's strength had probably reached the level of an Earth Saint Master, it was still just a guess. Now that the old man had personally confirmed it, he had no choice but to accept this reality. The old man before him was actually an Earth Saint Master. Sucking in a deep breath, Xianxia calmed down very quickly and said, "Senior, if I said that I don't have any battle skills, would you believe me?" Hearing that, the old man's smiling face immediately became stern. A sharp light flashed through his eyes and he said, "Wu Yun, my patience is limited. I don't have that much time to waste with you. It's best if you hand over the battle skill quickly. Otherwise, I'll have to do it myself." Reaching this point, the old man's voice paused slightly before a sinister smile appeared on his face. He said, "If you really don't have any battle skills, then it doesn't matter. You can stay in my Harlador clan for a while and write down all the battle skills you know, as well as the method of controlling saint weapons to fly freely in the air." Xianxia sighed inside when he heard that. He knew that there was no turning back now. Unless he handed over the battle skill, this Earth Saint Master old man would never let him go no matter what. The only thing he could do now was fight to the death. Only then would he have a chance of escaping. Moreover, Xianxia also understood that even if this old man wanted to kill him, he wouldn't dare to do so before he obtained the battle skill. What made Jianchen feel even more helpless was that he didn't have any battle skills. All he had was the cultivation method of the Azulite sword manual that was mistaken for a battle skill. Since he had made his decision, Jianchen didn't hesitate any longer. He stomped his feet on the ground and quickly retreated. Seeing Jianchen's actions, the old man revealed a disdainful sneer. His body then shot towards Jianchen like a phantom, his two hands reaching for Jianchen's neck like lightning. The light wind sword appeared in Jianchen's right hand. Facing an Earth Saint Master, Jianchen didn't dare to hold back at all. He immediately used his greatest trump card, sword manipulation. Welcome to Immortal Cultivation Audiobooks, your gateway to the mystical world of Xianxia. Dive into legendary tales of martial arts, spiritual growth, and immortal ascension. Here, we bring you full-length English audiobooks of the best Wuxia and Xianxia stories, from young prodigies to ancient sect wars. Perfect for fans of Against the Gods, Martial World, and tales of demons and gods.